At the beginning of World War II, as dictated by the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which divided Europe between Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, Lithuania was given an ultimatum to allow many Soviet troops into the country. Powerless to resist, Lithuania agreed. Soviet troops then entered the country and deported to Siberia many political activists and people who resisted the Soviet regime. The regime nationalized wealthy factories, increased farm taxes, and put rubles to circulation. Lithuania almost immediately experienced an economic drop. But 1 year later, Nazi Germany occupied some of Soviet Union, including Lithuania. Germans at first were seen as liberators of Lithuania, but when they established their own oppressive government, the people began to rise up against their occupants. While some Lithuanians became involved in the Holocaust, it was partly because the Soviet Jews played a big part in the deportations of thousands of Lithuanians. After Lithuania was occupied by the Soviet Union, some soldiers became involved in guerrilla warfare with the Soviet troops. Guerrilla warfare only died down after Joseph Stalin died and Nikita Khrushchev gained power. Khrushchev was also responsible for ending the deportations. Afterwards, Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic, abbreviated SSR, lived in relative harmony. However, the people couldn't speak out or joke about the government, and learning the Russian language became mandatory. In the 1960s and 70s, Lithuanians became influenced by various genres of Western music. Western music was a way to express freedom in the Soviet Union, and therefore was heavily persecuted by the Soviet regime because they deemed this Western music as corrupting the Soviet citizens. There were also spurts of demonstrations against the government, some of which included self-immolation. The Soviet Union's planned economy at this time yielded bad results. There were many deficits, as the government planned what to produce and what not to produce. Essentially, what people demanded wasn't being made, and what people didn't need was being made in huge quantities. The quality of the products was poor. Lithuanian SSR, however, was well off compared to other SSRs. Often the Lithuanian delegates bribed the committee that was responsible to distribute money. That way, Lithuanian SSR got some financial support. After Gorbachev came to power in 1985 and privatized companies previously owned by the state, Lithuanian companies immediately started making a variety of products. Deficits started to disappear, and people's standard of living increased. After Gorbachev's glasnost policy, Lithuanian people immediately began to speak out against the government. They held meetings and rallies, waving their flags in the air. In 1989, exactly 50 years after the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Lithuania joined its neighbor Latvia and Estonia in the Baltic Way, in which about 2 million people lined up and joined hands from Vilnius to Tallinn to form a human chain spanning over 380 miles. Though, of course, the government disliked this protest, the Baltic activists wrote to the United Nations, asking them to monitor the situation. Thus, the government was forced to soften its relationship with the Baltic states. Finally, on March 11, 1990, Lithuania re-established its independence from the Soviet Union and became the first SSR to do so. The struggle for peace and independence did not end there, however. Soviet Union demanded Lithuania to revoke its declaration of independence and started seizing large buildings. On January 13, 1991, the Soviet troops tried to overthrow the government and take over the Vilnius TV tower. 14 unarmed citizens were crushed by tanks, beaten to death or shot, and 700 were injured. But Lithuania succeeded in withstanding the attack, and after this attack, the Communist Party was banned in Lithuania. The last Soviet troops left the country in 1993. The Lithuanian people could live in peace and freedom again.